talking about. Oh, yeah.
Hi, and welcome to Ward 13. My co-host today is Matt Connarton, and our guest again is Jim O'Connell.
Doing double duty.
Because the last show, I think we got up to 1971. You were a lad in Wales, and you were trying to figure out decimalization.
Yeah,
decimalization, right?
I remember pound, shillings, and
six
pence.
bob, whatever it is.
I could talk about that too. I probably have some in the closet at home.
That'd be wonderful.
Hey, geez, Rich Gerard has a way of finagling his way into the show, doesn't he, Matt?
He does, and I've heard that he has his own fancy parking space at Jacques' Flower Shop.
I know
Super
that.
secret location.
I know that for a fact because I was up there at 4 o'clock putting a Joe Kelly Lavasser for Haldeman sign up there. I would think the SLB would be up there at 4 a.m.
Yeah, well, he's always watching.
Always watching.
Always watching.
Hey, let's talk about another thing. Hey, Brendan, can we see number 6, the Gatsis benefits? Now, Ted Gatsis railed against the school board members. I don't think he attacked the Board of Aldermen this year for taking benefits. Yet Theodore Gatsis, who's worth probably $8 to $10 million, it might have eroded a bit. All those trips to Aruba and all those Clams Casino and everything. He took $15,229.24 in health benefits, $754 in dental. Life only $57.12. I guess because when you get up there, I thought the premiums go up.
Yeah, I guess. I don't know.
Disability $57.60. But look at that, Matt. Retirement $15,631.20.
Yeah.
For a total benefits of $31,729.16. And this is a guy that is continually railing against people taking benefits.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, this guy is such a hypocrite. I was on Jim's show. He didn't want to be mean. I said, that's why I'm here.
No, if straight talk and being honest is mean, then I'll be mean.
Right.
But there's a lot to be said.
He is a hypocrite, and I don't know what else to say about it. It kind of flabbergasts me because, as we were talking about during the break, he is a piece of work. He's threatened me. I've had the threats come different channels and stuff.
Right.
He's that type of person.
Well, he and I disagree. My problem with Ted Gatsis is that he refuses to admit that there is any problem with education in Manchester. And so I said to him, we can disagree about that, but let's at least agree that our schools are in need of improvement, that we actually, and he would, because, once you reach that step, then the next discussion becomes how do we improve it.
Right.
So he wouldn't go to the first step of saying it needs improvement.
He doesn't want to do anything.
Because he doesn't want to do anything.
Yeah.
And then everything he has proposed that I know of in the city of Manchester since he's been a mayor has coincidentally cost nothing. So any solution that costs nothing. I use the example of when we were out, when the people of Hooksett were eventually ready to walk, and this is when we had kids sitting on the floor at Central High School with clipboards, and we had 42 kids to a class at Hillside Middle School. It was during that period, and the Hooksett school board sent a notice to our school board saying you're not in compliance, and all the rest of it, and you're in breach, and those meetings were to be had, and so the first meeting that was to be had, a couple of things happened. First of all, Ted Gatsis lawyered up. So there was going to be no public conversation of any kind.
But lawyers paid for by the city.
Of course.
Right.
I mean, city. But the other thing was poor Tom Brennan, God rest him, we had to come up with a document on 24 hours' notice, which he prepared and presented to the people of Hooksett. And that document was about 15 pages long. I could be off by 10%. It had 2 pages at the front end, which were lots of bullet points, like 10 on each point. And then there were like 13 pages of bump. The 13 pages of bump were notes on what's it called? The online, I can't think of the name of it right now. The online teaching high school, the online charter high school, which anybody can use, and it exists. So it was a set of notes on something that everybody knew about already. The first 2 pages were the blended learning thing, and we were going to have teachers standing in front of cameras and teaching. So you could
Right,
go,
right.
you could be at Central High School, and you could teach to the 2 other schools at Memorial, thing, which actually is a commendable enough idea.
Well, that's a good innovation. Yeah.
Yes. It has problems with it because you can't walk over to Mary or Johnny and say how you actually do this problem here would be this. So it has it's not a panacea.
It's not
but
perfect.
but at least it was an idea. So you'd say
Yeah.
here. So my problem was this was his response to the problem of firing 164 teachers and overcrowding.
Okay,
Right?
right.
Now I made the point. The New York Times happened to show up for the meeting, not by accident. They were invited.
It became a national issue, didn't
Yes,
it, Jim?
yes, and it was on. It's carried on the New York Times, and I and the superintendent of Hooksett are quoted on there talking about it, and it became the Hooksett School District, and it became quite an issue because they were invited to come and see the innovation that was to be Manchester. I pointed out to them that if you look at the school budget in Manchester was, and I'm just roughly at the time, say it was 160 million, 161 million. I said the proposal, Mayor Gatsis came out to this meeting tonight to meet with the town of Hooksett. They wanted to address the shortcomings in our school district, and with the we were the lowest funded school district in the state. We had overcrowding. It was educationally unsound. We had eliminated middle school foreign languages. We had eliminated our unified arts programs. We fired 25% of the staff at Hillside Middle School.
That's incredible.
Out of 80 something people, 23 stood up and left.
Remember, we also
Not left, were fired.
Yeah, the diversity of the district was increasing, which makes another demand on personnel.
So in response for that, we had this first 2 pages of bulleted lines, and it was to introduce this. There was a number of things. One of them was to introduce this, whatever the word you want to use for it, talking into but the implementation of it, first of all, and this was going to be funded, of course, we were going to find funding for it. What we were doing, we were buying a video camera and a tripod for each one of the 3 schools.
Sure.
The total expenditure under that was $3,600. Right? That's what we were going to spend on this new program.
Yeah.
So in response to firing 164 teachers, right, with schoolrooms bursting at the seams,
Right.
with the superintendent of schools in Hooksett showing photographs of tattered books that his students were being given at schools in Manchester, we went out to Hooksett to a public meeting and said, don't talk about that. Let's talk about, we're going to have these new, we're going to go, it's going to be, Manchester's going to lead the way. It's like Manchester academic standards in the face of Common Core.
Yeah.
Common Core is a national issue, a national problem. We, the least well-funded school district in the state of New Hampshire, right? Less well-funded than the average per capita than the average school district in the entire United States. That's an interesting thing to think about, right?
Yeah.
So not alone are we the least well, or bar 1 or 2, least well-funded school district, and these are all measures in terms of per student in the state of New Hampshire. But here in the 6th or 7th wealthiest per capita income state in the Union, we spend less on our students in Manchester than the average student has spent on them across all 50 United States, which include wonderful
Arkansas,
but not very
Mississippi.
wealthy places like
that's incredible,
So anyway,
yeah.
so we go out there, and my point to the Union, to the New York Times reporter, who was writing a wonderful story, by the way,
Yeah.
at this time, because it sounded innovative and nice. And I said,
Right.
well, before you write the story, you're a reporter. I can't tell. I just want you to take some pause for a minute because you're eating the red meat and sucking the soup here.
Yeah, drinking the Kool-Aid.
And I said, look at the numbers. How much is being spent on this program that's being developed in response? $3,600. I said, Mayor Gatsis wants you tonight to write a national story on spending $3,600 in a district that spends $161 million a year.
Right.
You would need far more cameras
Right.
if you're going
Now-
to interact.
now, I happen to
so
know-
It's
Oh, yeah.
just fly by night.
When we did,
Shell game.
and that's all.
Yeah.
That all sits in the schools today with dust on it, by the way.
Right.
But we have
That's true because they still talk about
Right,
using it.
yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Did it never even? Did it ever
This,
got?
this
well,
year
no,
they were
wait.
talking about
So
it.
Really?
at that time we had a teacher who was brand new. He might be 1 year a teacher. I
Yeah.
know the guy well.
Yeah.
We had a brand new teacher who was teaching. I can't remember what. I think it was economics, and I could be wrong about that because it's an older memory. But anyway, whatever. I think it was economics. He was teaching at Central High School, and he was teaching the other schools. Now, this teacher had no experience. He's a wonderful young man, who's gone on to better things, and he still works in the district. He had no preparation, so he was given nothing, no guideline.
Yeah.
So he's now talking into a picture this, right? You're standing in Central High School when the Boston Globe wrote a story about this, which sounded great because they only saw what was going on at West,
Yeah.
because they were brought with the mayor in tow. The mayor brought them into West High School and stood because there was going to be no more mistakes, like Hook said.
Yeah.
This time he was going to be standing there and control the message.
Right.
I didn't get the story. I didn't get to hear that the Boston Globe was arriving. So the Boston Globe and the union leader went over to West High School and stood with Ted Gatzis in a room. And they had 6 or 7, not too many, I don't know the exact number, students who were watching this teacher at Central High School talking into a microphone or into a camera that they'd spent $1,000 on. What they did not know, and is absolutely true, is that teacher was talking to an empty room at Central High School.
Yeah.
So now, think about how stupid this is.
Didn't
so
the
now,
Globe publish a story
yes,
not knowing
yes.
that?
No, they just knew they did Manchester Innovation, and we're going to start. We're going to be the first. We're going to lead the way.
Yeah. It's all theater.
It's all theater because
Potemkin Village.
and yes, Potemkin Village, exactly. So here's it. Now the teacher would tell you himself he'd never taught the subject before. And he found it very intimidating. I don't put words in his mouth because this guy could be identified. He's identifiable from the information we're giving out here. I just don't want to name him.
Yeah.
But he's capable of speaking for himself. He had had no preparation. The school, the superintendent or the district didn't say, the best way to manage sort of non-present students is through this, or perhaps you should design the course, you should, this is how you might present this part of the subject or something. Nothing. No professional development, no nothing.
Right.
Here's the course, Economics 101, which you'd normally, and we're taught to teach in a classroom in front of kids. Go into that room, stand in front of the camera.
Opportunity.
Stand in front of the camera.
Give me the script.
So now let me say this. And this is where things get a little, grayed a little bit, because I don't think there's anything wrong with the idea. I think the idea is probably,
Oh, yeah.
I don't think education, just like we had French nuns with the big hats, in the 1850s, we don't have to have education with 30 kids in a room looking at a blackboard. I mean, I think there are new methods.
I mean, you can take college courses online where you have a similar.
Correct. So I'm not against innovation.
Right.
I go back to what I was saying. There isn't a thing that has been proposed by Mayor Gatzis for education in Manchester that hasn't coincidentally cost nothing.
Right.
See, if you really were going to launch something like that, you'd have to bring in experts.
Exactly.
And some of them are right here, like at SNU. The guy, there's a professor that wrote a book about how you have to teach the 21st century.
Do you
child.
remember when Kathy Staub led an effort to do an analysis of requirements for the city of Manchester, right? And they had they came up with a strategic plan, which still. You can blow the dust off the back of the binder over at McGregor Street. Well, actually, it's on the website. If you go on the website, and you'll see it's all been updated for 2013-14, and then they kind of forgot. The gerbil fell off the wheel.
Yeah.
So Kathy Staub led that effort, and she brought in a gentleman from Southern New Hampshire University who pro bono was going to give of his time to lead the exercise. So he was simply just going to facilitate it. And some of those meetings I attended were actually at Southern New Hampshire University. He first came in, the poor man, one of many, to walk into City Hall in Manchester, and he walked in and happened to say the wrong word when he got in. And the mayor just laid into him. I don't remember the details, but it was one of those many meetings where the mayor just put him right back in his box, and the gentleman wouldn't proceed. And Kathy Staub convinced him, and eventually he did and got back into it. But that was the first reaction was, you don't tell me. And that brings me to one other thing, because I've talked about this problem of sort of truth to power, and generally speaking in Manchester, we don't get the true story. And I'm not into.
Of course not.
I'm not into paranoia or sort of stuff going.
Oh,
I
am.
Well,
and Matt's guest side.
I'm not.
Yes.
But yes,
He's still
sure.
alive, huh?
But,
no bullet holes.
I've yet to be murdered. Yes.
Right. But I have to tell you, this idea that people like I know that it was a gentleman who went before the school board, and he was asked, and it was from the technology side. Just so that's pretty specific. The technology, because there's only 5 people working in the IT department at the school district.
Are you kidding?
Who do great work, by the way, because I think there's a much higher number work on the city side. But the largest department in the city only has 5 IT people working in the IT department, and they've actually done a great job. They deserve a lot of credit.
That's better than NORAD and the nuclear. We found out we have 1970s computers and 8.5-inch discs. Never even heard of such a thing.
So well, at least they're not hackable. That's the wonderful thing. It's like having a 3.5-inch floppy disk. nobody
Right.
would know to get one.
Right,
Get one.
right.
Some Russian scientist would be like, no, nothing. Igor, come over here. So anyway, so he goes in front of the school board, and and the questions were asked, and the mayor asked the question, and there was a pause, and we know now the question, like, listen to what's going to happen next, the kind of thing, right? Because it's all about setting it up for theater, and now you've got a chance to think about what answer you're going to give.
Right.
So let me ask you, and take another big breath, and it was, do you have sufficient fun, do you have sufficient resources to do the job you want to do? Did we, or more leading perhaps, and I don't know the exact words, but did we not give you everything you want? Did you not get, right?
Yeah.
Right, that's what Ted Gass
So the
is,
poor
construction.
the poor guy whose job is IT and not politics says, no, it's not, we don't have enough resources for the job we're being tasked with.
Yeah.
And the face goes red. The face is usually orange, goes red up there.
Right.
And excuse me for being mean. No, I'm being mean.
Darker, yeah.
Yeah, it gets darker red. And there was and so but it passes by for most people watching that, or who were at that meeting, wouldn't have seen that much because there's but obviously he knew. The mayor knew this was, the guy was just going to give him straight answers, and no one had told him not to, so he
Right.
didn't press too hard.
Well, I got a question
Now,
to ask
after
after
that
this.
meeting, the night of that meeting, or I think it was the following day, I talked to I only want to say this, a senior administrator in the school district. And I brought up the point, when I said it to the person, sort of, wasn't that kind of terrible what happened last night? And the person, who I know well, stopped me in first sentence and said, I know. He said, I know. He said, we told him right after the meeting, I told him, first thing I said to him, hey, come here. You can never say that. You can never say that again. When you're asked, don't ever say. Now, he didn't say that's a firing offense, but his boss told him, and he told me that he was telling him, right?
Yeah,
told
okay.
him, you can't say that to Ted Gatsis. You cannot tell him you don't have the resources you want.
Right.
So if you're Nick Willard or you're Mr. Goonan and you're asked the question, do you have enough fire trucks? In Manchester, there's only one answer. You want to think long and hard before you say, not really.
So
now, I
is
don't know if
that-
it's true of fire and police, but it's certainly in the school district, it's absolutely true. If you're asked the question, remember there was a principal, there was a principal went before the school committee. This is a big deal. It's already
We're
inside.
talking about this year?
Within the last 8 or 9 months or 6 months, a principal
yeah.
went before the school district one night who was incensed at something that happened the month before because it had to do with special education and there were open-ended questions asked, and the mayor associated himself. He was like, well, he was asking questions which he knew the answer to, and the answers were things that are not in the public domain. And he particularly didn't want them in the public domain. But now we're having Alice through the looking glass conversations at City Hall. Like, I know you can't tell me the truth. Say, what is this I'm hearing about? And I know all about it, but you're not. So that principal went into the meeting. This is in the public record. He went to the meeting and he said, he went up to public presentation. You can go look this up. And he said, Mayor, I remember what you said to me the last time I came before this board. And remember the conversation you had with me when you said, you better remember who got you where you are. Because that was the conversation that principal, Mayor Gatsis, went to this individual, and he said it in public in the public forum, when he went to the school board and said, he was asked questions of the school board, and he answered them. And I'm not saying he got a phone call from Ted Gatsis the following morning, but within days of that, Ted Gatsis took him aside privately and said, you better remember who got you where you are, which he didn't get him where he is anyway. But it was a clear. The next time you come to one of my board meetings and you're asked, do you have enough books, paper, pencils, teachers? Is the parking lot got holes in it or not? You know the answer you have to give.
Now, see, that's not Ted Gatz's fault. That's the school board's fault. That's the members of the school board and the aldermen.
They don't
that
even see it going on.
That don't. Oh, I got to say something. I'm not very impressed by the school board members. I mean, you talk to them. This is first of all, there's never been a mayor that ran the school board like him. Nobody ran it, micromanaged like this man.
Nobody pushes back. Who's there
It
currently?
used to be the vice chair
Right.
ran the meetings.
Dave Gelinas used to,
Yeah.
he kind of had when Dave was there, he had that sort of ambiance about him but he deferred to Ted all the time. So Mayor Gatzis, I think, got the bad habit right out of the box because Dave Gelinas was sort of collegial and, he was the chairman of whatever it is, the chairman of the school, the vice chair.
He's the vice chair, but he runs the meeting.
Yeah, but
a chair is supposed to be neutral.
Right.
And mayors traditionally didn't even really bother with
and the
that.
vice chair also is the one who chose the subcommittees on the school district.
Exactly.
And what's interesting in the school board right now is that the dynamic has changed with the new school board that came in this past January.
Yeah, because
no,
we
a
have
year
a
ago.
poisonous, that Rich Gerard. Before I listen to the morning show at 7, they have the school board meetings. And you think you're listening to Gerard's radio show. He never shuts up.
Really?
The problem with the school board with Gatzis is he doesn't trust anyone, he doesn't respect anyone, and he's convinced he's the smartest kid in the room.
Right.
But then you've got Gerard who thinks, I'm the smartest kid in the room.
Well, aren't they on the
And,
same page anyway, though?
No,
Gerard and
not
Gatzis?
always.
Not always.
Not always?
No.
They have a dance that they have.
Well, what
It
did it-
didn't really
did-
drive Teddy
Right.
crazy.
Really?
And then you're on Ted's side.
Right.
He can get me on Ted's side.
Interesting.
What's interesting about this new school board, or new, it's not so new now because it's almost halfway through its term, but was that the previous school board was basically Deb Langton and Art Beaudry versus the other 12. I mean, that wasn't as simple. That's the simplest way of putting
And
it.
the whole idea that he would become Beaudry would become vice chair.
Yeah.
Now, he's a nice guy, and
yeah,
I remember him when he was Ron Filbert, who was the president of the Firemen's Union. He was his second in command. Even then, he was a person that can't see the forest but for the trees.
Right.
But a nice guy.
So, a nice guy.
But
So
somebody
Art,
that's not fit to be the vice chair.
So Art, it was Art Beaudry and Deb Langton versus the rest. Not versus the rest. It wasn't competition like that. But if you went back and you looked at the votes, you would find the propensity of the votes were 12-2. With often, and then depending on the subject, one other board member would join the minority.
Right.
Yeah.
But like we have a 5-4 had, if we had a real Supreme Court anymore, the 5-4 of the Supreme Court, it was a 5. So it was it was 12-2. Now. What we now see a different dynamic because Rich Gerard has joined the school board, and I think and I think Rich will be glad to hear this. That I think he does bring a different dynamic. I'll get that's just a statement of fact. You may not like the dynamic, but
Right.
he certainly is filling some space. Whether that's to the good or bad, I'll let you judge. But now you have a couple of other, the idea that our Beaudry, that's sort of Teddy bringing. Shakespeare says in Julius Caesar, right? Act 2 of Julius Caesar. I think it's Act 2. It is Act 2 of Julius Caesar, and Julius Caesar says he sees Cassius, who will eventually, murder him along with Brutus, and he says he looks over, he sees Cassius, and he says, "Methinks yon Cassius has a mean and hungry look." As he's sitting at the Senate looking around, and he says, "Let me have about me men who are fat." So not ambitious, right?
Right,
So
right.
you don't, like the guy who wants to be the next CEO, you don't bring him in,
Exactly,
make him
yeah.
head of something. You send him to, off into someplace
Yeah,
else.
we need
So-
to run the Rich Gerard with the bowling ball between his legs.
Oh, yes, that was
Have you
impressive.
seen that?
No, I have not.
It's an impressive display of athleticism
Really?
from Rich Gerard, absolutely.
So I don't know if it's a good or bad thing, but it has changed the dynamic. So it's not now simply those two versus everybody else. But I despair is too strong
Who's
a word.
paying Gerard? He does pay for play,
He does? I didn't.
Oh, yeah.
I didn't know that.
That's when you see them on the school board looking for a superintendent. I always wonder if you look a little where you can always find strings attached to him.
Right, really?
I can tell you the different things that he's done.
Does he bring flowers from the flower shop? That'd be nice.
Well, he advertises
For your
flowers.
funeral,
He advertises flowers.
I wonder where he disappeared for those 10 days. Because there's rumors that he's got a lawsuit filed against him, but we can talk about that another time.
This is all beyond my pay grade.
But see, there's one thing that you brought up. In Manchester, it's like being in Russia or Soviet Union. The Gatzis Gazette, the union leader, doesn't publish anything. There are things that happen in the city that never get reported on. And there's things like when Ted Gatzis runs the civil rights commissioners out of a
the
meeting, and
yeah.
then we lose money because of lawsuits that never get reported on.
Right.
Never get reported on. Nothing is ever reported on it in this city.
Right. There's a whole thing. I don't want to. This is the kind of controversy that I think is controversial. I'm not trying to make it controversial. I think it's a controversial subject. But that whole that whole issue of the Office of Civil Rights, the OCR, and the NAACP and their involvement. There is a well. Let me say, when the mayor was running for office the last time, his first debate was at Hillside Middle School.
Yeah, I was there.
Right, and with Joyce Craig, and he was now the Bring It program, which is a wonderful program.
Explain what that is.
The Bring It program is a program that has been run now for. It used to be at Beach Street, and Brendan McCafferty, the principal of Hillside, is very much involved in it. And the Bring It program is a program. It's multifaceted, but it's where kids, most of them, the immigrant kids, but anybody can actually come. At Hillside, it's 2 nights a week. They can come, they play soccer, they do dance. There's actually a nursing program. It's we could talk about this sometime for people, minorities who are interested in becoming nurses. And they actually come 2 nights a week, and they do it for a year. They graduate out of there. By then, they have gone and visited hospitals, learned terminologies and all that, and they get accepted into nursing programs at universities. That's actually part of Bring It. But Bring It is more known for kids doing homework assistance. There's some great people there. Pat O'Neill, one of the wonderful people in the city of Manchester, and he won't like me saying that because Pat is a man who's modest and doesn't want his name said by me, and I'm sure I'll hear from him. But there are some wonderful. Billy Sheehan out of Trinity. They're doing homework assistance with kids. I once had my daughter, who I'm very proud of, who's I don't want to boast about it, but she's doing very well at university, an honor student at Syracuse, and one time she was. I remember one time she was in probably her junior year. One day we were at home, and I like a little bit of math, but we were like, it was a Tuesday night, and we were like, I don't know. And I said, hey, let's run over to Hillside because the guys are there at Hillside and they do homework help, and so. And so we ran over, and it was a math issue, and she was Billy Sheehan, who there's a little story inside the fold. Billy teaches math at Trinity. He's a good guy. I don't know if he teaches math, but he knows math anyway. But he called a buddy. He's like, call a friend. So he's like, hey, what is this? And they solved it right, and they explained it. So it wasn't about solving the one problem. That doesn't get you anywhere.
Right.
It was explaining the concept.
Yeah. So we got this
great program helping immigrants. So they were there. Back to the story. They were there that night. Sorry, thank you, John, for bringing us back into the.
It's called in psychology. It's transportation. You're taking us.
Right.
So they happened to be there at the time. So we brought. So those students were brought in because they happened to be in the building. They were brought in to be part of the audience to see sort of American democracy at work. Of African.
Yeah, they were from all over. They're from Iraq. They're from everywhere. They're a very diverse group. And people mostly concern themselves with the kids with the hijab and stuff. And
that's not from Manchester. You just moved here. He has a reputation as being, whether deserved or not, and we can talk afterwards, of being anti-immigrant.
Well, I've picked up on that.
People have tried to hang a racist tag, but I wouldn't say
I wouldn't
that.
hang that. I wouldn't hang that.
I would not.
I wouldn't do that. But I have to say this.
Xenophobic, maybe?
Perhaps. Well,
frustrating.
Seems like about 44% of people that tend to vote in the next election are xenophobic, so there's nothing new about that.
We'll have to do Brexit next week.
Yeah. So
speaking of xenophobia.
So he was asked, so they're sitting there, right? In the debate, and the question comes up about the challenges in Manchester and the challenges around schools. And his response, which this should have been a bigger story.
Right.
But his response, he said, he's asked about the economic challenges in the city and the future of the city and education city and all that.
And with the immigrants coming in.
No, but he wasn't asked that.
Oh,
he was asking. No. He made it one. That's my whole point.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
He was asked a general question about the challenges we have in the city and what we're going to do in education and more broadly economics and all the rest of it for the city and our economic challenges and our challenges for our future. And he chose to go here.
Okay.
This is very important because if he was asked about immigration, then it's perfectly legitimate to answer about immigration.
Right.
He was not. He could have answered about we need better technology. We need to do something about healthcare and the cost of benefits for teachers.
Right.
We need to do something about our infrastructure. He could have answered any way he wanted. He chose to say, this was his answer. When I went to Central High School, ladies and gentlemen, I can tell you there were only 2 people of color at Central High School when I went there.
Wow.
Now, before we go and malign the man in any sense and say anything else, there's his answer. So I'm asking you as the mayor of Manchester about the challenges for our school district and our future, and you think that's the issue? Now,
For him to just even take it there is
Right.
just kind of bizarre.
Bizarre.
Yeah.
Now, another thing, and I said
But he
this.
was setting himself up to position himself as actually a champion of immigrants.
No, but
Because he used that program.
But here's the guy who
okay.
said. But this is part.
that he went to before the debate. He went and had dinner with the kids, and I heard afterwards the kids were not
Right.
happy
Well-
that he used them that
Well,
way.
it's amazing to me that he's standing in a school where he taught 42 kids in an 8th grade classroom was a good thing, that he's having this. But I have to tell you, this is part, and I kind of forcefully said this to the people who are searching for a new superintendent. Ted Gatsas has said for years that there are, whatever number he uses, 80 or 90 languages spoken at Central High School. This is dog whistling code words. Let's just call this what it is, because there are not 80 or 90 languages spoken at Central High School. I'll have 3 kids at Central High School next year. You know, I don't know what the number is. It might be 10. I mean,
Yeah.
go and look at the languages used globally.
Right.
And after you get to about number 15, it's very hard. Well,
Right.
there
Yeah.
are some individual tribal languages in Africa, which I don't claim to be an expert in this, but they will teach. Everybody might speak French and Swahili,
Right.
and then they have a local language which is in a 20 square mile area.
Sure.
But
Exactly.
how they actually communicate is through these,
French
or
and Swahili, so it's
Bengali,
so-
and so
sure.
there are broader languages, but there are lots of small. It's like being Catalonian, and you say, well, we've got a Catalonian. If there's a guy from Barcelona at Central High School, he's not Spanish. He's speaking Catalonian.
Right,
We've
right.
got Venezuelan and South Venezuela, North Venezuela off the coast, Venezuela
High
once
and low
removed.
German.
So this side every time he said this publicly at meetings many times about the fact that we have, and I think he's used different numbers, 80 or 90 numbers.
Yeah, I've often heard
languages.
that said, but not just by him, but
But
by others as
presidential
well.
candidates.
Yeah, and I always go, wow, how does
It's
that?
ju- yeah.
that
John
doesn't
McCain
seem,
was
What-
always
what-
saying.
doesn't seem possible.
But it's nonsense, right? It's
Right.
nonsense. And
Doesn't seem possible.
I got to tell you, we are in the small town, little city of Manchester, New
Yeah.
Hampshire.
Yeah.
It's the least diverse. New Hampshire is either the least or second least diverse place in the United States. It's Vermont and New Hampshire
Yeah.
vie for that privilege,
Oh, yeah,
right?
yeah.
So generally speaking, we're a very non-diverse area. And I go back to the word hubris again and ridiculousness. There are mayors of cities like Philadelphia and Louisville. We could go on and on. St. Louis and so there are places all across the country where there are all kinds of people living. From all kinds of places. And we have the mayor of Manchester saying that one of our challenges is now. By the way, if you take him at his word, then, and you were to say, well, here's one of our challenges. You go to the Manchester Central High School sometime and walk in. Show me the sign that says Bienvenue. Show me the,
Right.
show me. There's nothing there.
Right.
They publish a newspaper every 2 or 3 months. There's not a word. There's not French, Spanish, German, nothing. Let alone the 96
Last
languages.
Manchester's French language newspaper went out about 1970.
But my point is, if you
With
actually
claws.
were saying that this diversity was a great thing, and look at us because we're meeting the diverse needs of the diverse population, we're not saying that at all. What he's actually saying is, here's the reason why all our and the average guy in the street sucks this up, because I hear
Oh,
it all
yeah.
the time, that the reason why our schools are as bad as they are is because, or have the problems that they have, is because we have the challenges of immigrants and we can't afford to have immigrants anymore. I got to tell you, go to Memorial West or Central High School sometime and look at who the valedictorian,
No
the
kidding.
salutarian, and the
West,
top 10
it's-
students are, right?
West, it's
Yeah.
the Bosnia.
Right,
over
right.
in Central is
Right.
from
So
Sudan.
Yeah.
wonderfully, I embrace this. It's wonderful.
Yeah,
The
absolutely.
diversity of that population.
Absolutely.
But you go and you look. You go and look. You go back to the OCR and the inequity. There is inequity there, and not because it's nobody. I don't see any evidence of anybody driving it, and so I see people like Ted Gatsas using it politically, which I don't like, because I hear the dog whistles, loud and clear. But I do embrace the diversity that we have in our schools. But if you go and you look, let's go and look at the what diversity you'll find on the Central High School soccer team, or maybe somewhat in soccer, but on the football team, on the basketball team, on the whatever. You will be amazed that there is if you look at the body of students in the school, and then you look at the students that are participating in certain places, and there's not a correlation.
But Jim, it's an interesting talking about that. At Central, there was a student, a Dinka, East African,
Right.
who I guess, and he was on the sports team. I don't want to talk too much about him because he has to be, he was a minor.
Yeah.
And I think there was an altercation over there. And the police intervened or something. And he wasn't read his rights in his native
Yes,
language.
yep.
Now, when I was in Monterey, California, and when I got out of the Army, and my now ex-wife, there was a language line in 1990, which was bought by AT&T, and she'd always come back and all the people she'd talk to, because they had to do Portuguese. Now in Monterey, you have the Monterey Institute of International Studies. You've got so many linguists there.
Right.
Yeah.
That was like that's where all the linguists were. So they had this great human resource where when she'd say, we had a call from Fall River, Mass, and they had to talk Portuguese. And she was always
Interesting.
fascinated by the different things. But this is something that's 1992. How long ago is that?
Right.
24 years ago.
Right.
So actually, if he did need to hear Dinka or something, it's not too hard to actually do that. There are the resources.
They have them right now. You go.
Online, yeah.
Yeah.
It's my understanding, and this is just from the rumors and everything, that Rich Girard kept hitting on this kid. Actually revealed his name on the Girard at Large radio website, and I
And he's
have
a minor?
heard, yes, and when he revealed minor, and somebody,
Wow.
but how do you separate rumor from fact when you're just one person and you
Right.
don't have the union leader or WMUR or anybody else helping out? And
Right.
I heard once again a rumor that Girard's been hit with a lawsuit. And then he disappeared a little while ago
Yeah.
for 10 days. And then people always want to give you something extra. Oh, he's doing it because so-and-so
Right,
wanted him
right,
to
right.
press this issue.
Right.
Because the race card's very, very potent. Look we've got a
Absolutely it is.
jackass as the head of the major parties.
Yeah.
I never
Right.
thought I'd live to. This is
Right,
beyond
right.
even what Orwell
Yeah.
or Patty
yeah.
Chayefsky, who wrote
Right.
the movie Network.
Well, it seems to
So,
me like
There's this stuff going on in the city.
Right. Well, I don't like the dog whistle piece. I don't like the piece, like the idea that we have challenges in Manchester in our school district because of diversity within the school district is just the facts don't bear
But
it
it's
out.
a challenge that can be easily met.
Absolutely.
And turned into something
Right,
positive.
and then yes, and the diversity of our school, we can do ourselves a favor and a favor for all of Southern New Hampshire by actually embracing that diversity
Right.
and seeing it as a
Create
seeing
our
it as
own
a,
language line.
right.
Or businesses. And
Right,
stuff,
right. But
opportunities.
so the issues, the inequity that does exist within our school system, and there will be people upset at this because there are wonderful people working on the ELL programs and they give of themselves and
Right.
beyond to do these things and oftentimes the people who might be listening to this will say, I could do, you know how much I've done, I could do no more, I'm giving 120%. Yes, you are, but it doesn't matter because when we find sort of to use the word balkanization of effort, right, where people are in these little stovepipes and I can go to places in Manchester and go to communities where there isn't a single person. The people you see at all the other meetings will not be at these. So there are corners of the city where there are people, from the Asian subcontinent, there are people from the Middle East, there are people from North Africa.
Yeah.
I mean, I was at Central High School. I remember members of the Bhutanese community came by. There was when this previous principal was there, and there was an effort to be made to try to embrace people from outside. So. This is too big a topic, it takes too long. But in that particular night, the New Hampshire State Organizing Project, they had advised the principal to actually, engage in a different way. That the model of just inviting parents in and having them come to the theatre in Central and then speaking to them from a microphone on top, many of them didn't have the language, you would do it a different way.
Yeah.
The different way, it could be lots of things. It could be in the cafeteria, or in group sessions around coffee or something, or whatever it happens to be. It wasn't done like that. One time, 25 members of the Bhutanese community happened to show up, and that's a large group for, we can't get 25 people, for meetings for lots of time.
Yeah.
And
that's remarkable.
it was remarkable, and they came, but we didn't meet them even 75%, 25% of the way, and that was the end. That was the end of that. I have used the example of, and I love John Philip Sousa, and my kids play in the band, so I loved it. I'm proud when they march down the street, right? But if you can't have it both ways, you can't be using the dog whistles about we've got a problem with immigrants and we can't have any more refugees in here because we can't afford. Well, then if that's really the case, what you should see when Central High School goes marching down the St. Patrick's Day Parade, which I'm very proud of. Then I'd like to see an Afro-Caribbean steel drum band go marching down representing Central, right? Why wouldn't we have that? Right. Why wouldn't we have an African band? Why wouldn't we have an Indian or a Bhutanese music going? Why aren't we listening? So there's none of that. What we see is John Philip Sousa marching down Main Street, which I'm fine with. My problem is with a politician saying our city's too diverse already. Right? And that's where we're spending our money. Mr. Mayor, you're not spending dime one. You're not buying them a foreign language book. You've taken foreign languages out of our schools. You've eliminated programs in our schools that would help all these kids. So what you've actually done on your time is you've removed services for immigrants in the city, but you still want to talk to people who are more perhaps bigoted or racist and say the reason why we don't have all the things we should have in our city is because there were only 2 kids of color, etc. when I was there.
I just think he's an intellectually limited person. I came here in 2010 back, and I'm here. Ted Gatzis is a great manager, and that was his first term. And at the end, where is
and
this?
a great negotiator.
Where is this?
John, he's a great. He would have you think because he does it at every meeting. Maybe I should negotiate it. What? Give me that contract. I'll negotiate it.
Does he do that?
He does. Yeah. Whether it's books or whatever else. Let me get that. He negotiated with 3 surrounding towns, and he came out the loser in all 3. So he's batting
$7 million deficit.
He's batting 0. So
he was going to go negotiate with Hooksett because we have the 42 students, and Hooksett said, I'm going to go negotiate. Well, they pull out.
Well, this is like
$7 million deficit.
Well, this is like Donald Trump, the great businessman. I told us the other day. This is the guy that's six times into bankruptcy. So here's a guy. If you wanted a great American businessman, right? And I think an argument could be made that maybe in politics it would be good to have a great American businessman. Well, I don't know, pick your flavor, but maybe people won't like the Common Core people won't like this, but Bill Gates, Steve Jobs, the head of IBM, the head of ExxonMobil. How about the head of GE, Jack Welch? Maybe Jack Welch would have been a great president. What we have is this real estate mogul who was handed $35 million dollars by Daddy, who says he's a great. Where's the evidence of the great business? I don't know anything that he's created.
But for a twist of fate, he'd have been selling vinyl siding on Long Island.
They would have been gold siding.
Hey, here's a question that somebody wants me to ask you. It's about the superintendent, the new superintendent. This is in the person's own language, although, I should have written it out for you to read.
Yeah.
Gatzis drove the superintendent out of town. He picked her. He hired her to do the job. No, he hired her, paid her over $200K with her benefits. Then he wouldn't let her do the job. Then he just would not let her do the job. And he hounded her out of town. And when Stinky Gerard got on that board, and it just became like, we're back at the Spanish Inquisition, which Gerard actually says was, got bad press. You could see him in auto da fe.
I don't know if all of that is true because I don't know actually.
The superintendent,
Superintendent, right? I mean, God bless her and all that, but she obviously wasn't the right choice. I think we could all agree with that.
But because she's got Ted Gatzis, did he let her do the job?
Well, like you were saying, he's a control freak, right?
Well, but
he harassed her constantly, and then suddenly Gerard's there with his unending questions.
At the meetings, you mean he would harass her?
He's bullying her.
Well,
he's insulted her this year, right?
Tom Brennan was a lovely man, right? You may not, you can pick your faults. He was a nice man as an individual, and very well qualified and very well respected.
Everyone liked him.
Right. Yeah. Now, he also was intimidated by Ted. I was in their presence. I saw that dynamic in place. I walked into the mayor's office and I walk in and there's Tom, the attorney, Tom Clark. I've asked for a meeting and it's not meant to be confrontational. We want to talk about schools. Right. And the superintendent's at one end of the long table in Ted's office and Ted's at the other end of it. And there's Tom Clark. Tom Clark looks at me and I go, "Hi, guy, how you doing?" And Tom goes, "Hi." His daughter was in school with mine. And I look at the mayor and I'm like, "Mayor, so is there something like I didn't?" And he said, "I'm not talking to you without an attorney in the room." That's what he told me.
Really?
Yeah.
Interesting.
That's what he told me. So
Why
anyway,
wasn't Tom Arnold there?
so anyway, the superintendent of schools, and this was in non-public session, and it's like, but the superintendent of schools informed the board a long time ago she was leaving, and
Well, she gave up a year of her contract.
right.
Yeah.
Well,
Because she had an extra year, and then she.
Well, no, before this current leaving,
Oh,
she
okay.
told the school board that she was all done.
Oh,
that
in
she was-
non-public session.
In non-public session. she
she's
gave a
fed up
notice she
with
was
him.
done. So the quid pro quo, and now this is only what I know that happened for sure in multiple sources. People I know, and it's not meant to be out, and they can go work out how I found out. But she offered her resignation more than a year ago, and an accommodation was reached. What I understand about the accommodation was Ted said he'd hold her back. That he'd look at, not hold her back. That
So
he would
for
he would
her
cover her
retirement.
back. Now her, she
So she positioned her for her retirement.
well, there's mutuality of benefit here, right? So she would because she didn't want to be facing as I understand it, this newly elected school board that was going to be perhaps even dysfunctional, and we'd have people questioning all day long and keeping
mean
her
what
late.
actually happened?
Yeah, staying until midnight. So it was like, I've got your back, right? So don't leave. I got your back. Now, the self-serving nature of this is that Ted wants to run for governor, right? So the last thing he wants is an explosion in and now going to a whole new search thing. Let the search all happen after the primary
Right.
and after the election. So he got to delay this miasma out through the system to get him out through October, November of 2016,
He had
which
to
is
get
where
through
we
the
are.
election
Right.
first.
Yeah.
So this don't resign.
Landslide Teddy, 64 votes.
I won't let them attack you.
Right.
They won't bring you down.
So he lied to her.
Well, now let me be very
I
clear
have-
for the people who are listening.
Yeah.
I wasn't there. I didn't hear that conversation, and that's what it was. People looked at it and said that's why it was done. I do know for sure that she informed the school board a year ago that she was leaving, and she was asked by Ted Gatzis, or at least agreement was reached that she would not leave. But she was making it clear she wanted out back then. So yes, I mean the idea that she was never. Here's the thing that go back. I was talking about Dr. Brennan a minute ago. Dr. Brennan, I met with Dr. Brennan one day, and Dr. Brennan and we were talking up at his office in McGregor Street. As president for Citizens of Manchester Schools, and we had a meeting with him, and it became apparent during that meeting that he had to, before he could have a meeting with us, he had to tell Mayor Gatzis he was having the meeting. Because I was saying, let's meet and talk about stuff, and we can, I wasn't saying any secrets, but like we can, we don't have to go. I mean, I'd be happy to meet on record, off record,
He's
any way you want.
threatened by anything or
So
anybody.
Brennan says, so imagine this,
Here's
right?
Tom Brennan.
He's on $160,000 a year, right? Not a $200,000 package. He's running a $160 million, now $165 million enterprise.
The biggest part of the
biggest part of the
government.
city. He is the guy, right, that you've hired as a highly qualified guy. And Mayor Gatzis requires him to write down every meeting he has in advance.
Wow.
Tell him his agenda for the next week, down to the most discreet level. I'm meeting John Hopwood from 9 to 10. I'm meeting Jim O'Connell from 10 to 11. I'll be, from 12 o'clock, I've got, show me your diary, basically. Now, Mayor Gatzis tried to do the same thing to the head of the airport, if you recall. And when he was being voted in as the, the National Association of Airport Managers.
Right.
And he was going to now be required to travel more broadly, or at least for longer. He'd go to conferences and
International
right. And Ted
confabs.
Gatzis in City Hall had a problem with this.
Really?
And you can go look at the records of this. He wanted to know why he was spending 3 days down in Los Angeles at the annual meeting of
No kidding. Wow.
and other members of the board were at pains to point out the fact that the head of the Manchester airport is going to be the national head of all the airport representatives in the country.
It's a good thing.
It's a good thing, and we should be delighted by what you want to do. And Ted Gatzis made the point, like, if why does he need to be there for 4 days, looking at his diary? Where are you going to be next? But in that circumstance, the head of the airport refused
Good for him.
to say, I'm going to submit to this scrutiny, because that's what Ted wanted.
And he had
Yeah.
the Board of Aldermen back
and
the
back him
aldermen
up,
backing
Yeah.
and said, no, you're not. You don't have to hand your diary to the mayor every week. But that's the kind of micromanagement we're talking about. I mean,
Wow.
that's
That's
dis-
probably when Danny O'Neill was chairman
well,
of the board.
that's dysfunctional, right? I mean, and it also, and I don't want to be unkind to poor Ted, because I think he
No,
likes,
that's my job.
But he is. I think he likes to be in control, and that's probably what. So I understand
it's
it all being.
dysfunctional.
It is dysfunctional.
It's freakish.
Like I've worked
Look at what it's done to this city.
I've worked on management groups, with a CEO, and I've been lucky to be at the C level a number of times in companies. And I've taken CEOs aside who were friends of mine and said, when they were bottlenecks, because the very nature of the kind of person who often becomes a CEO is like well organized and all that stuff. But usually they're entrepreneurial, they're decision makers, they make great decisions, they make them very quickly.
But that was Mike Gatzis, the brother.
But those people often find themselves sitting, and they have to understand that they're limiting the growth of the company if every decision has to go through you.
Right.
When you're in the bathroom, we can't function as a management team.
You have to be able to delegate.
Let the CFO.
That's Napoleon and his marshals.
Let the CFO make mistakes, and if he loses money he shouldn't, then fire him.
Right.
But Ted doesn't want to do that. It all has to go through him. So this is the thing. Like imagining, I think he sees himself as the expert on the drug crisis, the expert with regard to the fire department, the expert with regard to the school department. He has the answers.
Yeah.
And it reminds me of when Governor Craig Benson when he was there. Just a little story about him. Just the same.
Only got 2 minutes.
Right. So Craig Benson is not long. He's in office like 6 months or something. He got called for jury duty. And the union leader wrote it up that it was going to be wonderful. Another mayor would be too grand. Another governor would be too grand to go and act like a normal citizen in Concord. That's how they sold the story, which is fine. So he's on our dime. We want him running the whole flipping state. Well, plumbers get out of their jury duty.
Right.
But it's commendable enough.
Yeah.
But what's amazing, he's interviewed by WBU or WMUR or the union leader, whichever, I think it was WMUR, at lunchtime of his first day at the case. So he's been a juror for a morning, and he's interviewed at lunchtime. And this is what he said. Let me quote him, not verbatim, but very close. He said, yes, it's wonderful to be it was a great experience. It is a great experience. He said, I've already seen 2 or 3 things that need to change here this morning.
Interesting.
He's a juror.
He's a juror, but from his, because of his very broad mind, and he's able to look at our method of jurisprudence, and he's discovered areas for improvement in the first 4 hours.
And he lasted 1 term.
Yeah, well, but that's the attitude that sort of caused you a problem. And my friend John Stephen, he is a friend of mine, candidate for governor in the past. And John, John,
his sister-in-law lives right next to him.
Well, John, was made head of safety first, and then Craig Benson made him director of Health and Human Services. And John's a friend of mine. But I remember John, standing once with a bunch of papers under his arm, and he was like a week and a half, 2 weeks in the job. Yeah. And John won't like me saying this. Sorry, John. But he, this is okay. This is how he lives. This is this is what they believe, and that's fine. And then let's back it up. I'm just saying the truth. You can be my friend, and I can tell the truth. Yeah. And so John says to me that he has these papers that he's just taken over as the head of, I think, Health and Human Services.
Right.
He said he's like, maybe he's 2 weeks in the job, and we're talking, we're standing together, and I'm saying, and I was pleased for him, and I'm saying, what a great deal, biggest department and all that. And I said, so how's it going? He said, oh, Jim, and he talked to some, and he said, I told Craig, he said that I'd have proposals on his desk, and I don't want to misquote him, within a month or 2 weeks or 3, like that kind of time period about where the cuts were going to have to be made in the Department of Health and Human Services. So I'm thinking, like, your bum hasn't gotten warm in the seat yet. You just walked in, and you're going to come out with a list of proposed cuts that are going to affect old people, young people, poor people, the mentally ill, whatever else. And just all of them, their attitude to, because it all comes to, we'll just reduce government, so there's an automatic thing. How come John wouldn't go in and think maybe there isn't enough, we don't have enough, the social workers in the Department of Mental Health. Maybe I should be going to Craig and saying, Mr. Benson, we need to hire 10 people as social workers in Manchester. His premise going into the office was, I'm going to find out where all the cuts need to be, and I'm going to do it in 3 weeks and give it to Craig.
And that engendered a backlash that brought Maggie Hassan into, an elective office. And I know that because my family's part of the disabled community. Not me.
Some people. Anyway, there's, as they say, there's eating and drinking in this stuff back in Ireland. There's eating and drinking in it. So,
Jim, you really know your stuff.
I don't know if I know my stuff. I know a little bit. The bits I know. Like the Don Rumsfeld thing, there's what we know, there's what we don't know, but I'm always worried about what we don't know,
Right.
I like your phrase, firing a fence, because I didn't get to it, but there were rumors I heard last year, but we'll have to get into them another time, But,
All right.
Thank you so much, but we didn't
Very
get
much-
to
it was fun.
Brexit.
Brexit comes next. I had some people watching. All my English coaches, who were here for the soccer.
Oh,
rights,
really? Yeah.
They were really thought it was strange. I said, and they're asking an Irish guy to talk about Brexit. I said, yeah,
Sure.
we'll do it next week.
Yeah.
I'd be happy to do it
Okay.
again.
All right.
Well, thank you, and we'll see you next week on Ward 13.
Thank you, guys.